In today's note, we're going to be looking at the slope and the y-intercept of a line. So the equation of a line is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope, or also known as the rate of change, and b is the y-intercept, or also known as the initial value. So again, this should be a review from grade 9, but again, in our examples, we want to state the slope and the y-intercept of a line. Again, remember y equals mx plus b, as we just mentioned. M represents the slope, b represents the y-intercept. So if I look at my equation, y equals 4x minus 1, the m value is the 1 attached to the x, so in this case it is 4, so that means my slope is equal to 4. The constant on its own is 1, but I have to look at the sign in front to tell me if it's negative or positive. In this case, it's negative, so that means that my y-intercept is equal to negative 1. In b, it's the same idea. Slope is the number attached to the x, so in this case 1/2, and the y-intercept is the constant on its own, or positive 10. One thing you want to be aware of when you're determining the slope, it's just the number. The x is not included, so it's just the number. For c, I'm looking at, for the slope, the number in front of the x. In this case, it's negative 0.25. And I'm looking for the y-intercept, or the constant, the number on its own. In this case, I don't see anything here, right? Normally there'd be something here, but there's not. The only number that I can add that I don't see would be 0, or plus 0. So that means in this case, my y-intercept is 0. So if you don't see a number on its own, added or subtracted, that means your y-intercept has to be 0. For d, same idea. I'm looking for my slope, so I'm looking for the number attached to the x. This one's a little different because my equation is arranged differently, but I'm still looking for that x value and then whatever the number attached to it is. So I see a minus x, so that means that it should be minus whatever the number is with x. I know it's a negative because I see the negative sign, but I don't see a number. Because m is multiplied by x, that means there's a number or an invisible number here that's being multiplied with x. I see the negative. The only number that I don't see that has to be there because it doesn't change anything, if you remove it, would have to be 1. Right? 1 times anything is just the number itself, so that's why we don't often see it. So that means my slope is negative 1. My y-intercept is again the value on its own. In this case, it's positive 6. In example 2, I'm working backwards, right? So now I want to come up with my equation. Again, y equals mx plus b. The m value, again, is your slope, and the b value is your y-intercept. I'm working backwards this time to put the pieces together to come up with an equation. So I'm going to have y equals something x and then plus something else. The number that's attached to the x has to be my slope. In this case, my slope is 3. So I know it should be y equals 3x, and then the only other part is the y-intercept, which in this case is negative 2. So my equation will be y equals 3x minus 2. In example B, same idea. Y equals something x plus or minus something else. My slope goes with the x, so in this case negative 1 over 2, which is what the question is telling me. And then the y-intercept is going to be positive 5. So that means my equation of a line is y equals negative 1/2 x plus 5. For C, it's a little different. Here I'm given an equation, or a line, and I need to determine my equation. So again, the y equals mx plus b. So I need two pieces. I need my slope and I need my y-intercept. The nice thing about lines is that we can easily see where they cross the y-axis. Remember, the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, which we can see here. So if I look at my blue line, it crosses the y-axis at this point, which is my y-intercept, and the value of that point is -4. So my y-intercept is -4. For my slope, I can figure out using rise over run. So looking at my line, I see 2 points clearly identified, so I'm going to use that to figure out my rise and run. So in this case, my run is 4 in the positive direction, and my rise is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is 8. So my slope is 8 over 4, which I can reduce to 2. This means then that my equation will be y equals 2x minus 4. Again, just taking those two pieces and plugging them in. For D, again, it's going to be the same idea. I need to find my y-intercept, and I need to find my slope. Slope, again, we know is rise over run. And for my y-intercept, I need to determine those based on my line where it crosses. The y-intercept is easiest to find. In this case, it's right here. So this is my y-intercept, which has a value of 1. For my slope, I need to do rise over run, so from one point to the next. Again, I'm going from my top point to my bottom point, the two ones that are clearly identified. If I wanted to, I could also go to the y-intercept as well, because that is a clearly identified point. What I mean by clearly identified is that it crosses at grid lines nicely, so I know exactly what the values of the two coordinates, or the x and y value, are. So for my slope, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going -4 for my rise, over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in the positive direction. So my slope is -4 over 6. I can reduce this to -2 over 3. And now I just need to fill these values in to my general equation. The m value, again, goes with the x, so -2 over 3x, and then plus 1 for my y-intercept. So my equation of a line becomes y equals -2 over 3x plus 1. In example 3, now we're going to actually apply this idea. So in example 3, the graph below relates the cost of a pizza C to the number of toppings n. I want to determine what is the slope of a line, or of the line. So I have my line, I can figure out my slope using rise over run. So from one point to the next, I'm going over 1, 2. So my run will be +2, and my rise in this case. So while I'm only going up 1 square, I have to look at the scale at the side. Right, so the scale at the side, I'm going up by 5s. So even though I'm going up 1 square, my rise is not 1, but actually 5. So that means my rise is 5 over 2, or I can reduce this to 2.5. B, explain the meaning of the slope in the context of the situation. Well, looking at what my two variables, rise over run, rise is cost, run is toppings. So what my slope, or 5 over 2, means is actually it's $5 for 2 toppings. And when I reduce it or change it to 2.5, when I actually divide 5 divided by 2, what that's saying is it's $2.5 per topping. So the slope or the rate of change is telling me the cost per topping, which is 2.5 or $2.50 per topping, or $5 for 2 toppings. C, what is the y-intercept of the line? Again, looking back at the graph, I want to see where there's across this vertical axis. In this case, it crosses right here. So that's my y-intercept, and we see that it crosses at the point of 15. So in this case, my y-intercept is 15. What is the meaning of the y-intercept in the context of the situation? Well, the y-intercept in this case is the point 0, 15. Again, we know that the x value refers to toppings, and the y value refers to cost. So the y-intercept in this case means when I have 0 toppings, the cost is $15. So that's the meaning of the y-intercept. So the no toppings, the pizza costs $15. Or you could think of it as the base cost of a pizza. So the base cost of a pizza with nothing on it is $15. E, I want to write an equation that relates the cost of the pizza C to the number of toppings n. Looking at, again, my variables, C represented the y value because it was the vertical axis, n represents the x. So if I'm writing out a general equation, y equals mx plus b, using these variables, instead of y, I'm going to write c, and instead of x, I'm going to write n. The m and the b are just numbers that I've got from looking at my graph. So the m value we know is 2.5, and the b value we know is positive 15. So in the end, my final equation is y equals 2.5n plus 15. The key things from this note that we want to take away is, again, what the general equation of a line is, y equals mx plus b, the fact that m equals slope and b equals the y-intercept, and how to find those two pieces of information.